Hello, everyone. This is Thomas Pepin NHL Talk. I'm Thomas Pepin, and let's talk about the NHL. So, today, the topic I'm going to be covering is neck guards, is the kind of the cause of the subject. I was actually going to talk about this more broadly, not just neck guards, but um, yeah, so basically, what I'm going to talk about today is uh, protective equipment changes in the NHL, and so I'm going to talk about neck guards, the historic ones, um, so helmets and visors, and then just talk more broadly about equipment changes, whether or not they should take place, um, which ones, if I do think anything should change, and things like that. And otherwise, I see Owens showed up and has commented in the chat. So, hello, Owen. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so give me one sec. So, I have um, a web page here that it has um, rule changes, and so it would include equipment changes, but um, yeah, it covers things more broadly. And so, like, I'll touch on some rule changes related to equipment changes and things like that as well. So, um, I had like a couple minutes before the stream. Partially, the reason why I was late is because I was taking a look at this and some other things. So, um, yeah, I what I was gonna say is I didn't include the link in the description. I'll do that after the stream. Um, so yeah, so give me a sec to share screen here. So this is the site I found that had, well, it was the easiest to find website that had the information I was looking for. Uh, I don't know the website, so I don't know how accurate it is, but it's not really all that critical to be overly accurate, because I know generally what's happened with the rules. So as long as it covers things generally, then that's all I really need. So, and yeah, so Owen said that neck guards need to be mandatory, because it's something preventable. So, um, yeah, I won't share my opinion quite yet, but that's one person's opinion. Actually, to be honest, it's probably. I was going to say it's the most common, but I don't know if it necessarily is. It is a common, maybe not the most common. At the very least, it could be um, the most common. It's a very common uh, opinion on the matter. So, anyways, I'll get to my opinion later. I'm just going to kind of cover things, what's taken place, and then give my opinion later on. So, all right, so you can see the site here, and I'm just going to do a search for helmets. So, helmets became mandatory 1979 to 80 is what it says here. I believe that's correct or close to it, if not. Um, Players under contract prior to June 1, 1979 are exempted. So, as you would have seen if you saw older games, there's some players that were able to play without helmets. Um, and so that's the rule, is because people that were exempt didn't have to. Well, clearly from the word, but um, yeah, and then so eventually it no longer, like, that grandfather clause no longer existed because as players aged, they went out of the league and stuff. So that's one major change. I was just thinking, should I comment on each as I go or towards the end? Well, I guess one thing I should say, as always, these streams are done on the spot, no prep work except for the subject. Actually, all streams I do are on the spot, so I make it up as I go. Just generally know the subject, maybe have a couple links or main topics and things like that. But yeah. So anyway, so I think I'll talk about everything later on. I'll just kind of give the history first. So helmets came into effect then. I'm just going to go to each time helmets are mentioned, and the reason is because they're all kind of relevant to the helmet as a subject for protective gear. So in 2013-14, again, I don't know necessarily that this is all accurate, but close enough. People would be assessed a penalty for removing their helmet prior to a fight. Actually, you know what? I'll have to comment as I go because otherwise I'm not going to remember all these things. So, okay, so first having helmets come in, as far as I'm concerned, it's an obvious thing. I mean, our brain is one of probably the most, well, it's probably the most, well, it's the most important for us as an entity to exist as a person. If you don't have your brain functioning, then you aren't really a person. Like, I mean, you are physically, it's just that you don't exist in terms of like your interaction with the world. So it's obvious that in order to function as a normal person would, you obviously need to have your head working. So to protect it with protective equipment, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's obvious. Nobody wants to have their brain functioning less than optimal. So to allow injuries to your brain, which is a primary, if not the most important thing to you functioning as a human, I mean, it's like it's obvious. So yeah, helmets, them coming into the league, for me, it's obvious they clearly should have done that. Now, related to helmets, now this is why I think I need to comment as I go. So helmets being taken off prior to a fight. As a rule change, so the reason why I pause is because I'm not torn on the subject of having, like, making it mandatory to keep on your helmet during fights. I'm not against that. What I am partially against, related to it, is actually, I might as well just go to that next, and then come back to this. So visors became mandatory 2013-14. And I won't say about that. Visors are worn in a manner to ensure eye protection. Well, clearly, why else would you be wearing a visor? It's funny because, like, Komarov is the first one that comes to mind about how he has his visor up so high that it barely protects. It's just kind of funny. Yeah, that's it. So the reason why that's relevant to me, so I'm not against visors. Am I against them being mandatory? Kind of yes and kind of no. So coming back to the helmet being taken off for a fight, I dislike visors, and I think I spoke about this actually in like not last Friday's stream, but the stream before, just about fighting in the NHL. So I dislike visors in the sense that if fighting's going to exist, it's going to. I don't have any data to support this, but so growing up, I had a friend of the family who was, uh, well, he only played a couple games in the pros, but he was a fighter, and so, and it's not necessarily from him, but just the enough exposure to fighting because he used to train people how to fight uh, in the OHL, so juniors in Ontario. So because he used to train people, I was around it often enough. I know that visors are just they're bad for fighting because you clip that with your knuckles and stuff. It's the same with helmets. But if we've already established that helmets should be mandatory, I believe they should be mandatory to keep on during fighting. Helmets, yes. Visors is the problem here. So if you're if it's mandatory to keep on a helmet for fighting and then visors are also mandatory, you're now creating it where people can get hurt. Like I know it's just knuckles and stuff, but you can like completely tear up your hand punching, well, helmets too, but visors in particular because you're aiming at their face when you're punching typically. So I don't like visors in that sense. So if fighting's allowed in the NHL, I don't think visors should be mandatory. That's kind of the simplest way to put it for me. Um, I saw another article and it mentioned about the Berard injury. I think it was off of. Wait, or am I confusing ones? Anyways, because I know wasn't it Chera that also got a puck to the face? But anyways, I know at the very least Berard and he had like a ruptured eye or something like that. So without visors, that injury is at risk. Um, with visors, you're still at risk of injuries because things can come up underneath the visor, like sticks. Um, do I think that visors prevent injuries enough to just like enough to make them mandatory? I don't think so. I would hope that the league would have done their research on facial injuries, the causes of those facial injuries, and then um, determined that visors would have prevented the wide majority of those injuries. I'm not confident that they did. I didn't do the research, and to be honest, I'm not going to. Whether or not they did that research, and to be honest, I bet you it's not even public, them talking about it. Um, just intuitively, it doesn't make sense that it would prevent all or even the most serious of potential injuries. Because, like I said, sticks can come up under visors, pucks can deflect up under visors. Um, there's a whole bunch of different things that it wouldn't really prevent. It's only like a head dead like center shot right to the center of the face, and it's like, how often does that happen? People typically react quick enough, and if they don't, I mean, a slight angle change and the visor would have been irrelevant. So, how often does it prevent injuries? It just doesn't feel like it would. So, I'm a I'm against visors if fighting's in the NHL. Um, and I've already established that I like the idea of fighting in the NHL. Do I think it's great or absolutely necessary to the game? Absolutely not. I'm not so strongly in favor of fighting that I really care all that much. Um, it's just, I think it's something unique. Like I said in the previous stream where I talked about fighting, I like the idea. It makes it, as far as I'm concerned, like the toughest sport. Or if it's like, because I mean, football, you have hard hitting, but you don't have hard hitting, a hard surface that you're falling on, hard boards that you're running into, people hitting you. Like, I mean, I like the idea of it being, as far as I'm concerned, the toughest sport. Um, I'll kind of talk about that as well um, when I kind of summarize things more broadly. But so I'm for fighting. As a result, don't like the idea of visors existing. Again, is it all that crazy of an injury to cut your hand up from punching a visor? Not really. It's just a hand, and but it's just it can stop people from playing. And with the frequency of fighting, I would argue that it's more likely that you would lose man games to injury from keeping visors than from getting rid of them. Would Are you preventing more serious injuries from visors? Yes. So it's kind of your balance of severity versus frequency, and quantity, like so frequency, duration, things like that. So I mean, I totally obviously get the argument for visors, but that's my reason that I'm against visors. Helmets, absolutely. And even with fighting, I mean, like, if you get injuries to your hand from punching a helmet, like, I mean, and do you really lose that many injuries from getting rid of visors? I don't know. It's just an easily preventable injury if you're keeping fighting, basically. But helmets, I think, should be mandatory because it's just like it's massive. So like brain trauma is a huge thing, as I've already established. So, anyways, so that's kind of my overall opinion on helmets and visors. Now, there's no other equipment, like, I mean, there's changes to goalie equipment, but it's primarily, I would argue, about sizing as opposed to protection. um, Helmets for goalies, obviously, like all that kind of stuff, it's not even worth talking about. So really, that's kind of it on the rule changes. And actually, let's just see if, because I just saw illegal checks to the head. That I'm like, I mean, that's not equipment, but I'm totally for preventing checks to the head because it's not a hockey play. It's unnecessary, and you can also prevent it by hitting people in the body as you're supposed to. So, yeah. So, anyways, there's not much more to talk about there. Okay, so I can get rid of this, and then I can just go back to full screen. Give me one sec here. Whoops. Okay, and then so basically the other thing, so those are the equipment changes now that have already taken place. One thing, just before I talk about neck guards, I want to also comment on the subject of cages. So this is this is what I was actually planning on talking about at some point during this season, and then just neck guards happened to come up. So given that I'm against visors because of fighting being allowed in the NHL, it would be the same argument about full face cages. Now, what I actually so if fighting was stopped in the NHL, then I'd be totally for full face cages, because I mean, there's now no real reason um, why you would not just proceed to that. Because so as far as I'm concerned, so when I was growing up, I was a goalie, but for me as a goalie, I would have to be looking through um, like the wire cages and stuff, and of all positions to really need to see the puck, it's goalie. So the fact that I never found it a major issue to look through cages, as far as I'm concerned, there's no real excuse why players shouldn't be able to adapt to cages. And the whole fact that we were raised with cages or full face shields where you're looking through, um, well, it wouldn't be glass, it'd be whatever the materials are. I don't really know what they're made of, visors and stuff, but I'm assuming it's some sort of plastic. But so, anyways, um, the fact is, most of those, they have those holes and stuff, and that's gonna obstruct your view anyways. So whether it's a cage or a visor, and then the chin cage, whatever you want to call it, they're, as far as I'm concerned, more or less the same. And like I said, I never had any issues. I mean, I never played pro, and yes, maybe it makes some slight difference in your, because clearly if there's things obstructing your view at different spacings in your vision, it's going to prevent you from seeing things perfectly accurate for you to be able to then, so for example, if you're going for a deflection and you have to like track the puck through all those things, it it gets in the way of your ability to do things uh, with the most precision. But is it so much that it's a big deal? No. I mean, again, if goalies are able to track pucks through those things, and I can tell you, it's not that big of a deal to look through um, whatever you call it, wiring or whatever. I just don't see why it wouldn't be a big issue to make it cages mandatory in the NHL. So, but that's only if fighting is not in the NHL. So I've got a very, like, clearly it's a weird perspective on this. I think cages would be great to prevent injury, obviously, to your face. And why wouldn't you do it? In, like, it wouldn't make any sense if you're trying to protect people's faces. It's just that if you're keeping fighting and you can't punch faces with a cage on, and then what's the point in having fighting? So it's either, in my opinion, either you go visors not mandatory fighting in the NHL, or fighting out of the NHL full face shields. And the in between of visors just makes no sense as far as I'm concerned, because why just protect half of the face? Just protect the full face, because I've already established you can see through the cage if you have a cage on, and we all grow up with either those visor combo things or the metal cages, and we all function. It's like there's no there's no reason why you can't just keep doing that up until pro. It just doesn't make sense. For the difference in performance, I think it's negligible. So anyways, so that's my opinion on face protection. Again, it's kind of a weird one. I want fighting in the NHL. That's my opinion. Again, I'm not so strongly for it that it's like I'm going to be massively upset if fighting got taken out of the NHL, but it's strong enough that I'm for it rather than on the fence. And as a result, both visors and cages, I don't think should be mandatory in the NHL. If we're going to get rid of fighting, then cages should be mandatory. That's my opinion. So that kind of covers my opinion on face and helmet. I hope I've given enough clarification as to why. And so one last comment. So facial injuries typically, and as far as I know, hasn't been any deaths caused by facial injuries. You would have brain trauma. I mean, I was a goalie. I got so many pucks in the head, and it hasn't really had a massive impact on my life. Now, I didn't play up until pro, so I've cut off half or more. Plus, I've also cut off harder shots hitting my head. But it hasn't impacted my ability to, I went through college and got a master's degree. So, I mean, like, it's not a big deal. And I have no, well, I mean, I'm sure people would maybe say I have psychological issues. I don't think I do. Nothing diagnosed. So, I think I'm functioning fine. So, as far as I'm concerned, and again, I had cages protecting my head, whereas if a puck hits you straight in the face, I mean, maybe that's a different story. But it's happened so many times, and NHLers keep playing. So I don't think, I'm not a scientist, but I don't think a puck to the face, unless it's like, unless you're having a guy take a slap shot from a foot away and it hits you dead center or whatever, right? In some place on your face that's most dangerous. It's just so rare that I don't think I'm so concerned about the risks of not having visors or cages, assuming fighting's in the NHL. So that's just kind of, again, my opinion. I'll talk more about that when I talk about things broadly, because there's my opinion that influences these smaller opinions, like my core opinion will kind of make more of this make sense as well. So that's that. So now moving on to neck guards. So I think what's best is if I explain my broad opinion now, because it's more applicable to this than the other, like I said about visors and helmets and stuff. So, okay, so my broad opinion is you can't prevent all injuries in the NHL, and at a certain point, you have to assume the risks associated with playing the sport. So if we really, and this is the thing that when people feel so strongly about neck guards and they voice their opinions, they're like, oh, they must be mandatory because somebody just died from a neck cut. Obviously, I don't want people to die from getting cuts to the neck. As far as I know, it's the first one where there's been a death. There's been some serious ones before, but it's the only one, as far as I know, that's resulted in a death. And if there's been more, it isn't overly frequent. So anyways, coming back. So people assume risk playing the sport. If we are trying to prevent all potential deaths, the sport wouldn't exist. So I can give you a bunch of examples. So people skate really fast. What happens if you catch an edge and you go head first into the boards? It's happened many times before. Have we stopped the sport? because people have run into the boards? No. Um, do we change massive so where people can't skate fast because they had the chance of tripping and running into the boards? Have we gotten rid of body checking because it produces concussions? Do we get rid of the boards because people can run into the boards and break their ankle? Do we get rid of skates because they can cut people? Do we get rid of the puck because the puck can hit people in the face and they can hurt people's faces? Like, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's just for the sport to exist, there is a certain amount of risk that people have to take on. What that level of risk is basically what we're trying to negotiate or determine here. Um, there are so many things that are not preventable in order for the game to still exist. So, like I said, crashing headfirst into the boards, body checks to the head, sticks to the eye, the face, the neck, a puck to the face. What happens if a skate cuts? I don't know. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure you could potentially cut um, like an artery. Is it an artery? Anyways, again, I'm not a doctor. Somewhere, because there's a few places where if you get cut, you're at serious risk of dying. So I believe there's some on the legs. There's other things like, I don't know. For example, let's say your stomach, because players typically don't have anything protecting their stomach. What if you cut deep right into the stomach and you cut through whatever's there, your intestines and your kidneys or whatever? Um, like in order to protect people fully, we need to get rid of the entire sport. The sport can't exist. It's too dangerous. So, if we want this sport to exist, we need to assume, as players of the sport, we need to assume risk. What are some of the core things of the sport? Skates are always going to exist unless we change to roller hockey. Pucks are going to always exist unless we change to some soft thing, but then that changes a whole bunch of characteristics of the sport. Body checking, we would have to get rid of because that's a danger. Like I said, speed of the sport, because you're gliding, even if it's on rollerblades, you can run headfirst into the boards. The boards aren't going anywhere. In order for hockey to be hockey, we have boards. There's field hockey, where I don't know exactly how they operate because I've never really watched the sport much, but do they have out of bounds? I don't know. Anyways, if we went to something like football where there's out of bounds, I guess maybe that would prevent some stuff, but it's just like, at what point do we, like, because then you can't bang things off the boards. I just like, the sport no longer is the sport if you make almost any of those changes. So the thing is there's risk. And like I said, basically what we're trying to negotiate here is what level of risk is acceptable. And I don't know if I don't have an answer, and everybody's got like varying opinions on it, like little fine details. So we're not getting rid of the speed. We're not getting rid of skates. I'm just speaking broadly about fans. I'm sure they would agree. We're not getting rid of checking at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes away. We're not getting rid of the puck. We're not getting rid of the hard surface that people can fall on and hurt themselves. Uh, we're not getting rid of boards. So that alone means that there's so many potential injuries that what is the difference between visor, not visor, with all those different serious factors? What if with a visor? Well, what if a skate goes and cuts straight across your face? Like, I mean, we have to wear cages in order for that to be prevented. Is that a serious injury? Is that serious enough for you? Like, I mean, this is what I mean is like the people that are like, oh, we need neck guards right away. I'm not, I haven't given my opinion on it yet, but I think people are jumping to these solutions and conclusions that I don't think they're doing it emotionally rather than logically. So, long story short, are neck guards going to change uh, or prevent so many injuries? Or even the argument that I've heard is the severity of the injury. Well, going headfirst into the boards has happened many times. How many people have become like paraplegics and stuff because of injuries like that? How many people have died of suicide from concussions, brain trauma that's messed around with their mental health? We know that that's an issue. So then checking shouldn't exist. And well, what about for goalies? So pucks shouldn't exist because they can give goalies concussions. How about the frequency of pucks to the head for goalies? Like, I mean, there is no way to prevent all these things that are actually more serious in terms of risk and frequency than a skate to the neck. So, I mean, because how often do you have a guy laying on the ice where a guy's going to like step on his neck? Or where a guy falls and his skate comes up and cuts him in the neck in the right way to cause a death? It's just like, again, you can't eliminate all risk in hockey. And you can't even eliminate serious risks to people's health. And we're not getting rid of stuff that's probably produced more deaths than skates to the neck. So then why is this such a big deal to add in neck guards? If you want to be logically consistent, then the sport shouldn't exist. Because, like I said, head first into the boards, breaking your neck. The brain trauma producing mental health issues, producing suicide. Like, I mean, you're not calling for an end of the sport. Why is this so serious? Yeah, maybe it's preventable. Well, all of these are actually preventable if the sport doesn't exist. And you're saying, oh, well, I want the sport to exist. I think suicides are okay, but I don't think cuts to the neck resulting in, as far as I know, again, one death. And again, I'm not saying that that it. I wish this person hadn't died from having a cut to the neck. I also wish that people haven't died from traumatic brain injury resulting in mental health issues resulting in suicide. So, I mean, long story short is we can't bubble wrap people. We just have to determine where the lines are in what's an acceptable amount of risk and what isn't. So I've already said my opinion on cages and helmets. It's easy for me to say as a fan. I believe that allowing fighting in the NHL and as a result not having cages is an acceptable amount of risk because that's just my opinion. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I I also don't like the fact that people uh, commit suicide from traumatic brain injury and mental health related issues. Um, but that being said, it is generally speaking a player's choice to consent to fight. Um, it's the same thing with boxing, with mixed martial arts, kickboxing, any combat sports, uh, football for that matter. People are consenting to it. Let adults consent to things like this. So, coming back to neck guards, basically my opinion on neck guards is if the league, so the players specifically, consent to having it mandatory, then it can be mandatory. I don't think that players should have consented and agreed to visors for the reasons I've already mentioned. Um, and yeah, so it's up to the players. Let the players decide. They're adults. They can decide what level of risk they want to take on. Now, that being said, logically speaking, and I know this because I own a neck guard, I am for neck guards. Now, I've said all that stuff saying theoretically that people shouldn't wear neck guards. But I'm going to argue the complete opposite because I'm actually for neck guards. Why? It's the same reason that I'm not against cages if fighting's out of the league. And so the reason is the new neck guards that exist are so flexible. I used to hate neck guards as a goalie because I had to like look around and stuff, and those big bulky things that got in the way, like they were really annoying. Should they have been mandatory? Probably still. I don't, especially for kids, because you want to protect them from dying, which is why all the way up to the NHL or, well, essentially professional leagues, all these things really should be mandatory because nobody should die playing a recreational sport. In professional leagues, that's where they're grown adults, they're performing at the highest level, let them decide. But up until that point, I think a lot of these things should be mandatory. So, anyways, going back to neck guards, they're so flexible, and they do not in any way get in your way of looking around and stuff. I know because I own one of the new ones that are so unbelievably comfortable. It's even less prohibitive than a turtleneck. So, as far as I'm concerned, even in the NHL, there is no real rational reason for not having neck guards. I think they should have neck guards. And it's because, the impact of these little things that are so flexible that are not going to really get in the way, they're not going to get in the way of your performance, so why not wear them? What they should make, moving to the next step, is it should be Kevlar or something along those lines, materials pretty much for your entire undergarments. So that way you're preventing or at least decreasing the severity of cuts all through the body. So if you have it as all your undergarments, that covers essentially anything that can be cut, except for your face, basically. So, and I don't know for sure that they exist, the undergarments. I know that certain things like socks, they have Kevlar socks. So I'm pretty certain they could apply it to all if it doesn't already exist. I haven't looked into it, and I mean, to be honest, I don't care that much. But those, if you're worried about skates, and to be honest, because it doesn't get in the way of performance so much, we should have Kevlar undergarments, and they should be mandatory. That's my opinion. That's all the way even through pro. Now, that being said, we're talking about these neck guards thing, and as a subject in preventing deaths. Well, what if uh, a player, like, this is why you can't bubble wrap people. Let's say they bend their neck, they compress the neck guard, and it exposes a portion on the back of the neck where you can get cut. Well, now you've no longer prevented that skate cut that can cause a death. So it's like, well, I mean, I don't know where you get cut to be at risk of dying, but even with all this stuff, you're not going to prevent risks. And like I said, I mean, you put all this Kevlar stuff on, you can still run headfirst into the boards and die. So I mean, like, it's just, for, again, people don't think about these things logically. They're not logically consistent. Um, just break things down into common sense. It's common sense that people can wear undergarments with cut protection, and it doesn't get dramatically in the way of things, and it probably should be mandatory. That's my opinion. And I think it's logically coherent. So now coming back, just broadly speaking, again, should neck guards be mandatory? Yes. And if you're going to do that, you should make everything cut resistant or cut proof or whatever the best technology they have. Otherwise, if you're not going to do that, you shouldn't make neck guards mandatory, because it's just not logically coherent. Otherwise, to be honest, I don't think there should be any other dramatic changes to the game, since we're on the subject of protective equipment and protection in general. So we're not getting rid of boards. We're not getting rid of skates. We're not getting rid of ice. We're not getting rid of pucks. We're not changing pucks. We're not getting rid of hitting. Yes, I'm against hits to the head. Otherwise, with hitting, you can still get concussions if somebody hits you in the chest. And what if you get... So we saw in football, and people have debated exactly what happened, but regardless, let's just take the simplest answer. So the guy that got hit in the chest and came unconscious, I think was the story in football. I think he was with the Bills. But anyways, you could get hit to the like a hit to the chest, and you could probably die. So, and we're not getting rid of hitting. So just like, where's the consistency if you're trying to make all these things mandatory? So all I'm getting at, basically, kind of to summarize all of this, is hockey is a risky sport. People who play it consent to that risk. Adults in particular have the ability to consent to pretty much any amount of risk. Let them consent to whatever risk they are willing to take on. That's kind of my opinion. One last thing I just thought of, well, I mean, I've thought of it previously, but I should bring up. Well, you also have to keep in mind about, for example, the league trying to make things mandatory is the league itself, as well as teams, want to protect these players as assets. So these are $1 million assets. They're getting paid millions of dollars to produce in the NHL. And they want to protect those assets in order to be successful as a hockey team and win championships and stuff. So what we also have to remember is that owners in the league itself also have a say in this matter. If they think, so this is probably, I don't know if this is exactly the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's the reason why visors came in. But regardless, we have to also remember that there's the ownership and management. They have a say too. So if they really want to protect their assets and they feel very strongly about certain protective equipment or changes to the game should take place, or should exist or take place, then we have to be willing to accept that stuff too. Players have to be willing to accept that. Sometimes people consent to things that are maybe too risky and too dangerous. Um, so sometimes you need the governing bodies or the authorities, or however you want to put it, to protect people from themselves, kind of. So, um, so we also have to remember that as well. So, if the league implements different things like gets rid of hitting or puts in full cages, gets rid of fighting, things like that, we have to realize that, people who put down money on this sport need to be able to protect their assets, their investment, um, just as much as players need to be able to protect themselves. So, just another perspective to consider. So, all of this is to say that there's no easy answer, there's no simple solutions, there's no. Uh, all of this has gradations of opinions, perspectives, uh, and all that. So it's just there is no simple solution. There is no way to prevent deaths ever in real life. If we want to prevent deaths, cars shouldn't exist. Like it's like people take on a certain level of risk. We need to allow people to take on the level of risk that they're willing to take on, within the, what is reasonable also from a societal perspective. So again, and in particular because neck guards is the big subject, deaths from skates to the neck are so rare that, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason to make neck guards mandatory from that perspective. But logically, the equipment is not going to massively impact the ability of players to perform. So, for that reason, it should be mandatory. So, anyways, those are my opinions on protective equipment and neck guards, helmets, cages, things like that. Well, everything, rules, fighting, checking, all that kind of stuff. Just safety in hockey in general. So that's pretty much all I can say. I don't know if I've necessarily given a clear answer. Well, I've given my opinions. I think that's as good as I can do. And then everybody else, I'm not in charge. So let everybody else decide who is in charge. So we'll leave it there. So if you like the stream, hit the like button, share with your friends, subscribe, turn on notifications. The channel homepage has upcoming streams on regular NHL content. Those take place on Fridays. So one in the afternoon, early afternoon, and one at, I think now it's 11 p.m. Eastern. In any case, take a look at the channel homepage for those times. So the next one coming up is this evening, where I do a recap of the week. So Saturday to Friday. And just for even, like I said, even for regular fans of the NHL, sometimes it's good to get everything put in one place. So if you're, excuse me, looking for something like that, you can tune in later for things I can't schedule ahead of time, like franchise mode for NHL 23. That schedule's in the About section of the channel. And on that note, I've changed the time because I have some things that delay, or that will delay me coming. So it's at 10 p.m. Eastern now instead of 9:30 p.m. with the time change. So franchise mode, that runs Sunday, Monday, Tuesday at that time. Be a pros whenever I have time or feel like it. Any comments, leave them in the comments. Suggestions, likewise. And that's it. So thanks for tuning in if you did. And if you have any opinions, like I said, leave them in the comments. It'd be interesting for people to give all their opinions and stuff like that. So thanks for tuning in if you did, and we'll see you guys later today. Okay, bye.